So let's crash on to our next keynote, and that's reducing tech debt and consolidating IT infrastructure. Delighted to welcome a man of huge experience, Daren Vallyon, Head of Solutions at Hyve Managed Hosting. Good morning, how are you?
Thanks, how are you?
Really good, thank you, really good. We've had a fantastic morning so far, some great feedback from the audience, but we are running slightly behind time, so I will take up none of yours. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Okay, good morning all. This is Reducing Tech and Consolidating IT Infrastructure. I'm Daren, as introduced. So technical debt is a phrase frequently used in relation to IT infrastructure. We see up to 20% of budget can be spent dealing with technical debt. However, it shouldn't sort of fall on IT. It should be a kind of joint up with business and IT working together to understand where the technical debt is and how it can dampen innovation. So technical debt in IT infrastructure describes the consequence of making short-term decisions for short-term goals, which are not sustainable long-term. This could be using outdated hardware, software, platforms, making shortcuts or not following best practices. These decisions can lead to quicker delivery or initial cost savings. However, you will need to pay back that debt in the future through fixes and reworks. I think the most common one we see, I guess, in recent times is businesses having a sort of cloud-first strategy with really aggressive milestones, so really aggressive timelines to hit. And to meet those sort of timelines, milestones, they choose to kind of take the shortcut, which in some cases looks like a lift and shift. And with that kind of lift and shift approach, that kind of hits a milestone, as in we've hit a cloud-first strategy, but we kind of see that we don't really gain the benefits of a cloud platform and the cloud ergonomics that cloud kind of brought to us as a business. Well, to us as businesses, you know, such as flexibility and your sort of OpEx model. So I think technical debt is the cost of additional rework caused by choosing an easy solution. Now, instead of using a better approach, that would take longer. Tech debt can be caused by a number of factors, including time pressure, lack of resources, lack of knowledge, and poor planning. Sorry, hold on. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So we'll cover the topic within these three following points with reducing tech debt and consolidating IT. So we've got the challenges of fragmented infrastructure. We believe that has quite an impact on incurring tech debt. Looking at choosing the right solution to drive business success, and streamlining resources and modernising practices. So starting with fragmented infrastructure and the challenges fragmented infrastructure and the tech debt that it can occur. So having fragmented systems is a challenge for any business and those that support it. We are seeing more of these challenges every day, and I think that before in organisations, we see it more with organisations with unclear strategies. I think a favourite for me, being an engineer a few years ago, or many years ago, was being asked to kind of deploy a system really quick, a test and dev type of system. And as we all know, that's got to go in quick. There's no real design behind it to hit a project deadline. And we find that then becomes critical. That then becomes a system that can't be shut down, upgraded, changed, and so on. And that essentially occurs with some tech debt with that sort of approach. I think historically, tech teams and stakeholders would pick a vendor. So if we looked at storage, having done quite a bit of storage obviously in the past, you would sort of pick a vendor and choose everything that they had to offer. You wouldn't necessarily look at multiple vendors, not normally anyway. You wouldn't kind of go data center 1, let's put EMC in there. In data center 2, we're going to put NetApp. And then on premise, we've got a database that we need to have there, so we're just going to put pure storage in. And while we may look at it in one aspect to say, well, the EMC is better at running the workloads in data center 1, and NetApp might be the optimal choice for running workloads in data center 2 because we want to do NFS SIFs, and NetApp's great at doing that, for example. And we just happen to have this database on premise that we want to get the best out of using a storage like Pure. Essentially, that's going to cause us problems with, how do we replicate? There's 3 different systems that we need to manage. The costs would be astronomical than if we just picked a single vendor and kind of got the best out of that from a skill set and a cost point of view. The same is similar to networking. With on-premise, you typically like the layer 2, layer 3 sort of networking, and then we move into the cloud, and while it's sort of presented with IP spaces and looks familiar, there's a lot of changes and differences within that. So you have to learn that. And then obviously things like NSX and SD-WAN, when you start using virtualized network overlays. Again, how do you manage all those disparate systems? You end up with either somebody needing to know all of those and maybe not have the expertise across the board, or you end up with different teams managing different areas, essentially then potentially with the silos. And I think with myself, even with compute as well, we're doing lots of flex pods over the years. You kind of do this compute network and storage. You pick a vendor with flex pods. It's a sort of Cisco, it could be Dell, obviously, if people do that, and HP. But I would always look at doing the familiar designs, familiar deployments, look at scripts, look at programmable platforms. When you have a consistent deployment method, you can predict the experience and optimize the deployment. And I've always been a great sort of fan of repeatable design and delivery. If you aim for that 80-20% rule, which is what I tell people, you can look at consistency there. 80% is always or near enough the same. You always need the same base configuration, such as DNS and NTP and so on and such. But then you go into the solution more specific stuff, which tends to be the 20%. When we look at things like deploying VMware, I think you can, there's always stuff that's always the same. You always, if we look at VLANs for VMware, you could say you always need a management VLAN. You always need vMotion, ideally. You always need storage VLANs if you're doing iSCSI NFS. You should always have out-of-band management, just in case you need to connect to it in a serious problem. And then that would kind of cover your 80%. You're always going to need those or account for those. And then the last 20% would be, solution-specific stuff, such as customer VLANs and so on. I think not only does this make the design easier, but also the transition right through to support. If the support are familiar with this approach, then you can make it easier to support that solution. And I believe this is a great example of reducing debt. So I guess coming back to those challenges listed there, we've got the silos, sort of gone through some of that meeting, but again, that can create operational inefficiencies and is always harder to escape. Increased costs. Again, technical debt can make it more expensive to maintain and upgrade your IT infrastructure. Being stuck on old versions of hardware or software can come at a great cost for support. I guess coming back to that, having sold storage in the past, some vendors might look at when it comes around to the 3 or 5 year refresh cycle, the ongoing support can be as much as just buying and deploying a new SAN. So again, there's other ways or examples of looking at incurring cost. Reduce security. Again, if stuff's fragmented, it's really hard to manage that. You're going to have different systems all over the place. You're not really going to have that security fabric which you're looking for to be able to understand what's going on within your platforms, of your applications and your data. So that can be a challenge. Decreased performance. Again, if you've got disparate systems in different places, again, looking at using and deploying different storage devices, or again, more today, we might have storage in public cloud like Azure or AWS, some on-prem. It's hard to kind of predict and manage those performances with having it spread vastly. Again, increased risk of failure. Again, I think that comes back to the management piece. If you are managing lots of different systems, fragmented, you do increase the risk of failure because, again, it's hard to manage and it's hard to keep an eye on all the different support that's needed. And then lastly, data management and control. If your data is spread in many different places, it's hard to keep control. You need to meet and typically meet compliance requirements. We see a lot of that now with artificial intelligence and machine learning, where you've got data in particular places, but it needs to be moved, extracted, transformed, and loaded into new systems. Again, that data management becomes quite a challenge when we have lots of fragmented systems. So embracing the cloud technology to drive business success. So being an architect, we look at these kind of points here listed as non-functional requirements. The functional is what the platform or the application needs to do, and these are the non-functional requirements of what the platform needs to do to support to make sure it works as required. Obviously, there's more that we typically account for, but for embracing cloud, we think these are the great starting points to get you started, and an absolute must. So the cost of cloud computing can vary depending on cloud provider, the type of services you use, and the amount of resources you consume. It's important to understand the long-term costs and implications of deploying applications to the cloud before you make a decision. Security. Again, that can introduce security risks such as breaches and unauthorized access. We've got different mechanisms and tools to use. Again, it might not be clear, you might not have the skills in-house to manage that. So again, that can introduce risk. We have seen it in the past where I guess people have shared storage and delicate documents, and we still see it now, and they're not being secured properly. Compliance. Cloud computing providers must comply with regulations such as GDPR and American HIPAA. It's the same with customers that use cloud. You need to make sure you're compliant and meet the regulations that are a requirement for you and your business. So again, performance, mentioned that in the previous slide, has been a challenge with fragmented infrastructure, but it's key that you understand your computing requirements and the applications, and depending on what cloud provider you use and the services, the amount of resources you consume, it's important to understand the performance implications of deploying applications to the cloud before you make a decision. Scalability, I think that was one of the big drivers for a lot of businesses for using public cloud. Essentially being able to scale quite rapidly, quite quickly, with infinite level, or that was the belief. Again, amazing. But again, with choosing any cloud or designing your application, make sure you design it for scalability. Without, I guess, looking at more of a hard-coded platform. Do you want to look at micro-segmentation or microservices, sorry? Do you want to look at sort of end-tier applications rather than that sort of, I guess, historical sort of monolithic application? And portability, I think that's key. Again, without getting locked into any particular provider, make sure that your application, your data is as portable as possible. I know that's challenging with some cloud providers, with egress costs, with moving data out of the cloud. But essentially, you want to make sure it's as portable as possible, of course. So we believe the benefits of private cloud is security and control. So maintain sensitive data and critical applications within a secure environment. Custom platforms. With private cloud, it's easier to tailor the platform for your organization's specific needs and preferences. Cost efficiency. So a key one here is optimize your resource utilization, leading to cost savings over time. Again, scalability. We believe that with private cloud, we can provide that scalability quite easily, ensuring that the resources grow as and when your business needs them. And consolidation. Get away from that fragmented platforms and look at consolidating some of this, but get the benefits of using the cloud platform from all those previously mentioned points there. To streamlining resources and modernising practices. So 48 of businesses, we believe, a technical debt limits their ability to innovate. By taking the steps to reduce your debt, you can improve the health and resilience of your IT infrastructure and protect your business from the impact of tech debt. So here's an analogy related to the lovely picture of the can on the slide there. Kicking the can down the road is a metaphor for delaying a difficult or unpleasant task until later. It's often used in business to describe the practice of taking actions that have a negative consequence in the long term in order to achieve short-term goals. Sort of reminds me of maybe politicians and some of the decisions they make, but swiftly moving on. For example, a company might decide to cut corners on quality control in order to meet a deadline. This might save the company money in the short term, but could lead to problems with product quality or customer satisfaction in the long term. Kicking a can down the road can be a tempting option, but it is important to remember that the problems will not go away. They will only get bigger and harder to deal with. Imagine you have a can of worms. You can either open the can and deal with the worms, or you can kick the can down the road and hope the worms will go away. If you kick the can down the road, the worms will still be there and possibly bigger and more of them, and it will be difficult to deal with them in the future. The same is true with kicking a can down the road in business. If you take actions that have negative consequences in the long term, those consequences will not go away. They will only get bigger and more difficult to deal with. The same is true for IT infrastructure. You should invest in high-quality hardware and solutions and software, follow best practices and regularly review your infrastructure. This may take more investment up front and to maintain, but it will be more reliable and efficient in the long run. It's always, believe it's definitely always better to deal with problems head on. It's difficult, even if it's difficult, kicking a can down the road in the short term will only lead to bigger problems in the long run. So moving on to the last slide and tips of start to reducing tech debt. And here are some additional tips. So again, within architecture, solution architecture, we look at running current states and gap analysis to map out milestones and look at providing solutions based on that. Planning stage. So really it's quite important to start by looking at reducing your tech debt by carrying out an auditing, understanding your infrastructure. That can be helped by using a managed service provider. Technical debt can occur when you don't have sufficient skills in-house or resources to manage your infrastructure, leading to potentially things being missed or rushed. With reviewing your pain points in your organisations and your gaps in your infrastructure, this can include checking outdated hardware, software, performance bottlenecks and legacy systems that are no longer maintained. Things like security vulnerabilities and scalability of your infrastructure are also key. Consider any of these points and look for quick fixes that can be addressed within your infrastructure, and address these first. Then look at the remainder of the pain points and any infrastructure gaps that you may have, and that need to be addressed through updating your platform, and make a plan. Once you've identified these areas and where you might be or where you are incurring tech debt, address these and streamline your processes, resources, and modernise your practices. You're in a better position to plan ahead and avoid technical debt in the future. Review your business growth strategy and identify points for growth, new products and services, and areas where your resources may need to change. See, here at Hyve, our experts will support and plan the future for your platform needs, if it's, as with any other service provider. So make sure you pick a good partner. Before you deploy all of your applications to the cloud, pick a pilot project. Test the waters. This will help you identify any potential problems and make adjustments before you make larger commitments. And sort of work with a cloud expert. If you're not familiar with cloud platforms, it's a good idea to work with experts in that field. They will help you make better decisions, or the best decisions you can, to help you avoid tech debt. As mentioned, it's about avoiding as much tech debt as possible. You will always incur some. You just want to reduce as much as you can as possible. Eliminate waste, and look at your cloud expenditure. Ensure that you can make visibility and transparency of your carbon emissions as well, as we know that's important. We believe embracing cloud platforms such as private cloud, you're not just modernising technology, you're revolutionising your approach to IT infrastructure, and the future of efficient, secure and agile business operations lies within your hands. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation. I'm not sure if there's any questions to take at this point.
Yeah, Daren, I've got one very quick question for you, because what I'd like to do is continue to look to the future for people, because I know you sort of touched on this quite a bit from your Uber analogy of kicking the can of giant worms down the road, which I love that analogy. It worked brilliantly. How do you suggest that people go about future-proofing themselves as much as possible? Because I imagine a lot of people get into these situations without really realising it and don't want to get in there again once they fix the problem.
Yes, I think that's key really, it comes back. I think if I looked at it from an architectural point of view and a business point of view, I think it's key to get the right people in the right place at the beginning. It's always hard to do so because of different, people getting pulled in different areas, but when you have the right people in the room, stakeholders, architects, people that are going to deliver the project, you get to make the right choices in advance. I think if you don't do that and you make choices based solely on one of, or even just two of those non-functional requirements, say we're just doing it based on cost, or we're just doing it just to be agile and get there quick, some of the other problems are going to come out. So really, if you look at those non-functional, map out what's important to you, and then as your business, talk with the teams and stakeholders and really pull that together. It will start coming out in the wash. You'll start finding where your problems are. You'll start understanding where you need to optimize or where you need to focus first. You know, when you look at deploying to any cloud or private cloud, which is where we think the gold is for a lot of businesses, it really is about looking at, the design, or if you do it in Azure and AWS, you look at landing zones. So it really is about mapping it out and then setting your milestones against that. So definitely look at all the non-functional requirements that help support what it is you're trying to achieve as part of the project or the business strategy going forward.
Daren, sage advice. Thank you very much indeed. I expect nothing less from you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us at Cloud and 5G Live.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.